Today's program is Flashpoints, Photography and Political Violence in United States. We have with us today an outstanding team. Unfortunately, one of the photographers at the last minute had to back out because of illness. Madison Swart will not be with us, but we will show her slides after the two other presenters go. And then we have with us Jabin Botsford, a Washington, D.C. based photojournalist, and David Dee Delgado, covering ICE and federal courts in New York City. And the moderator is Lauren Walsh. Lauren is a professor at New York University and the founding director of the Gallatin Photojournalism Intensive. She's also the managing director of journalist safety initiatives with the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, where she's heading a new online resource that addresses current and emerging threats confronting US-based journalists. So now let me turn this over to Lauren.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you to everybody for joining today. And so, we're a panel on political photography and political violence. It seems extremely timely to me right now to be discussing this on many levels, which is my hopes for today. And just to kind of lay the landscape a little bit before I introduce the photographers and let them take over with showing their images. In the United States in 2025, protests surged. And so when I say political violence and the visual documentation of political violence, I'm thinking of things like protests, political rallies, an assassination attempt on a presidential hopeful, and kind of militarized law enforcement on the streets. And so in 2025, there were more than 10,700 demonstrations nationwide, including over 700 that were specifically focused on immigration enforcement and deportation. So while this is going on, the risks that all journalists, and in this particular case, photojournalists, are facing while they're covering these events, the risks are growing. And Glenn mentioned I'm a journalism safety specialist, so this is kind of very much in my wheelhouse to be thinking about risk that journalists are confronting, and it has kind of unfortunately risen by leaps and bounds in the recent past. So just to give you one example, in 2025, at least 32 journalists in the United States were detained or arrested while doing their job, and the vast majority of them were detained or arrested while covering protests. And that's one sliver of a legal risk that journalists are facing, in addition to facing physical risks, financial risks, emotional risks, reputational risks. And I think we'll probably weave through some of that today as well. Of course, the context, the political context happening right now in the United States is paramount to this discussion. And again, to lay a little bit of the landscape, since January 2025, when Trump took office, hundreds of thousands of people have been removed from the United States. And some independent monitors are saying it's upwards of 500,000 people have been deported. That's not the only political conversation happening in the US, but it is, of course, a major one. And we will be looking at a lot of ICE enforcement in the photography today. So I think for my purposes, what I hope to happen as a kind of group conversation, primarily led by the two photographers who are joining us today, but involving all of us, is to think about what does it take to do this photojournalism? What is the role of this photojournalism? I would say, as a photojournalism professor at a basic level, it's to document, to disseminate so that the public can be aware. And some of these are kind of making the public aware of volatility, of emotion, of changing situations. But I think the job of the photojournalist isn't just to document and deliver in the moment. I think that what we are witnessing more and more is the role that photojournalists are playing in cementing the record of history, in helping to shape civic discourse, in framing collective memory, and at times in having impact on public policy. So, with that as just a little bit of a setup, I am going to introduce the two photojournalists who are here today. I will also show work by Madison Swart, who, as Glenn said, is dealing with bronchitis and really, really wanted to be here, but just can't. But I will show some of her work and I will read a statement that she wrote to share with everyone. But so for our two photojournalists who are here today, we have Jabin Botsford, we have David Dee Delgado. Their work places them directly inside the kinds of flashpoints that I was just talking about. So, Jabin, I'm going to start with you by reading your bio. Jabin Botsford is a Washington, D.C. based photojournalist and former staff photographer with the Washington Post. His body of work and expertise encompasses elections, politics, breaking news, disasters, sports, and in-depth feature stories, both nationally and internationally. Since 2014, he's extensively documented U.S. presidential campaigns and administrations, especially that of Donald Trump. He photographed the 2024 assassination attempt on Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, capturing the moment gunfire erupted and its immediate aftermath. So, Jabin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate it.
One second, everybody. I'd just like to intervene for 1 second. We're trying to do something different with this panel than we've done in the past, and we'd like to encourage your questions during the presentation. We'd like to encourage as much audience participation as possible. So rather than waiting till the very end, if you have questions for either of the photographers, put them in the chat, and when the time seems right, we'll go ahead and read your question and identify who asked it. So just want to let you know that before we get started.
I
Sorry,
think,
Jabin, to interrupt you.
You're
you
great.
know, good. I mean, I was going to read Dee's bio as well. Dee, let me just introduce you and then we'll turn it over. So,
Oh,
because
sorry
we
about that, Lauren.
totally fine. It's all good. David Dee Delgado is an Afro-Latino New York City-based photographer specializing in documentary and photojournalism. He earned the distinction of being a 2023 Pulitzer Prize finalist in breaking news reporting. He has also been honored with the Nikon Bill Epridge Award, the Bronx Recognizes Its Own, or BRIO, Award, and the Young Hee Grant. His work has been featured with outlets including the New York Times, Reuters, and Getty Images. He has extensively covered immigration and ICE-related stories under the second Trump administration, and one such image from that body of work, an image that was taken in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, was distinguished as one of Time magazine's 100 Best Photos of 2025. So Dee, welcome. Thank you for being here as well. Oh, you were muted. I think you probably just said something brilliant.
No, it wasn't nothing brilliant. I just said thank you for having me.
Thanks. Okay, so yes, now I am going to turn it over to Jabin, who's going to walk us through images. But I always find these setups a real privilege because we get to hear your experiences and insights, and hopefully also some of your challenges and thoughts. And just to reiterate what Glenn was just saying, we really want audience participation as we're moving. So any questions that occur to you, drop them in the chat, and Glenn and I will be keeping an eye on it, and we can jump in and politely interrupt Jabin and Dee while they're talking, so we can make it like a live conversation. So Jabin, I think with that, let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn, and the SDN, Social Documentary Network. Thank you all for being here. I am excited to share some of my work today. Like Lauren said, I've covered politics for a very long time, covered Donald Trump since 2014, 2015, and so the culmination of that work for me was one fateful day in 2024 in Butler, Pennsylvania. So let me share that with you. So, so for me, I've been to, hundreds of Donald Trump rallies at this point. It was the day after my birthday, and so I had to fly to Butler, well, to Pennsylvania on my birthday, begrudgingly, and it was quite frankly the last place I wanted to be. Especially because the Republican National Convention was starting the next day, and it felt like 105 degrees outside that day. So this first picture is just waiting around for things to start. The giant flag in front of or right behind the stage got tangled up in the most bizarre way. And everybody started saying like this was a bad omen or like something was off. For me, I was mostly just thinking about how unbelievably hot it was. but there was definitely a different vibe that day. And then the way it works is there's pool photographers, and the pool photographers go up to the front to the buffer area, which is the space between the crowd and the stage. And so we do that a couple times beforehand. And then more specifically, we're up front for the first 5 minutes of a speech, and then usually the last 5 minutes of the speech. And because I'm maybe a little crazy, every time I've ever been at a Donald Trump rally or really any political rally, I've always taken just like a really safe picture of the snipers in case anything went crazy. I would at least have one picture of the snipers. So this is my like safe picture from that day. Um, and then yeah, super normal otherwise. We were up front in the buffer area and Donald Trump came walking out. We kind of spent the first like 5 or so minutes photographing. Everything felt pretty normal. And then right around this time, this is about, I think I clocked it at like 50 seconds before the first shot. And so like right around now, they have press wranglers who kind of take us up that work for the campaign. And one of them was like, "Hey, do you feel like you have what you need? Like, are you good to go back to the riser?" You can see the riser in the distance in the back. And I was like, "Hey, like, I really don't have it that much like that many tight photos. Like, let me just like switch around to the front and get a couple tight photos before you kick us out, basically." And he's like, "All right, fine." And so right at this moment, I kind of moved around to the front corner of the stage. Um, and that's when shots started firing from right to left. So directly in the path. And this was those first moments. I was on the ground shooting my long shots, and I heard what sounded like fireworks to me. And so I stood up like a fool, being 6'5", about 2 feet in front of the stage, and looked around thinking like, are there fireworks? What's going on? I don't really understand. And in the corner of my eye, I saw Donald Trump fall. And I thought, oh snap, I'm holding the wrong camera. And so I switched cameras, and other than pictures of the ground, these are the first pictures that I started taking as Secret Service and military personnel just flooded the scene. Um, it happened very quickly, obviously, and I'll show you a video at the end that depicts that. So I moved around to the other side of the stage, and they jumped on stage and tackled him basically to make sure that nobody else could continue shooting at him. And you can see on the bottom corner of the frame, those are our press wranglers, the people that were asking me just a second ago if we were ready to wrap up. So obviously everybody is panicked and responding in their own way. And then, I mean, quite frankly, my first response was like, he very well could be dead. And like, I need to get a picture of it. I need to see his face. And so, kind of back in that image before, it was just a pile of Secret Service, and I just couldn't figure out how on earth I was going to get to see his face. And so, because I've covered this for, 10, 11 years now, I knew that there's always a path that they have pre-planned to remove in case of an emergency. And so I started to move myself around to the staircase. And as I did, they propped him up, and he surprisingly stopped and threw his fist up. And this moment happened in a split second. Um, and so I shot a lot of pictures. And then I also knew, again, back to the staircase, I knew that there was going to be a path that they needed to exit. And now that I had seen his face, in that moment, I only saw blood coming from his face. And so my assumption in that moment was he was very critically injured. And so I wanted to make sure I could get them carrying him away. So while a lot of my colleagues are kind of over here to the front of the stage, I ran over to as far as Secret Service would physically let me to photograph him coming off of stage. And I personally, this is one of my favorite images from the day, just because it shows the fragility of it all, that no matter if you're running for president or whatever, like you're still a person. and we all can die or be injured in any way, shape, or form at any moment. And though the campaign really appreciated different images from this day, to me, this spoke a very real, profound moment.
Hey,
And then,
Jabin, can I ask you a question, like while you're going?
please.
'Cause everyone in the chat is being super, super polite and not clogging it up, but I have to imagine I'm not the only person thinking you are so strategic, right? Aside from saying, I initially thought it was firecrackers and I stood up, and maybe that was not the smartest thing to do as bullets fly. Immediately after that, you start thinking about where's the president? Where do I move around? Which lens should I be using? Did you feel any like flash of adrenaline? Like, were you panicking, or did you really just kind of, I hesitate to say like dissociate, but you, your description sounds like you're kind of like, I gotta get this, I gotta get this. If he's critically injured, I'm gonna need to get that, which is like exactly what the news cycle wants. But I'm also like, as much as there's the fragility of Trump, there's Jabin, the person, who's also right there.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be honest, like I could not comprehend that myself, like I was in danger until was totally over. I mean, from the first shot to him getting in the car and being driven away was roughly 90 seconds. So I had no, it wasn't until about 5 minutes after. So after this, they move us to kind of like the green room tent behind this because there's chaos and they didn't know what to do with us. And yeah, it was in that moment when I saw other people like crying and responding and staff members and things like that that I was like, oh, like we were also in danger. Like I was really close to that. I was one of the closest people to the stage. Like that's wow. And so I called my wife and I called my editor to let her know that I just dumped hundreds of pictures into our system that she can sort out. And that was the first moment that I realized that I was like in danger. But in that moment, yeah, I mean, the most adrenaline I've ever felt. It was like complete tunnel vision. And covering politics for such a long time, I mean, I think once every generation, maybe somebody tries to take their shot on a candidate or a president. And not that you ever wish that, but way in the back of my head, I've always thought like, well, what would I do? Um, would I miss it completely? Like, would I have the wrong lens? Would I be in the wrong place? Or there's just like a million things that could go wrong outside of my own safety. And so when it happened, I just, I knew that if the most historic thing I might ever witness is going to happen 6 feet in front of me, I need to get a really good picture of it. So yeah, no, so I have like 10 pictures of the ground from my long lens that I was holding. And then I just grabbed my wide angle and I stopped it down to 5.6 because I normally shoot wide open at this stuff. And I knew I was going to want a lot more in focus than I normally do. And just started shooting, and it was thousands of frames, like so many thousands of frames. I mostly was trying to make sure that I wasn't hitting the buffer on my camera because again, like I just didn't know what was happening. And it was complete tunnel vision, like literal tunnel vision. I couldn't see anything other than him and the stage and the Secret Service. I'll show you a video here at the end that was I was wearing Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and that's a whole nother story. But I basically all of a sudden, once the shooting started, realized like, oh my gosh, like I'm wearing these silly glasses, like, and I just like started recording. Now the recording's only 30 seconds, I believe. Um, and so if I didn't have that video, I don't know that like I would have as tangible memory of it. Especially the sounds, like I'll play it for you all in a bit, but like the sounds and like everything going around me, I've only really been able to like soak in watching it after the fact. Because in the moment, I was only thinking about like, I have to get pictures of this. And that's all I can think of because I'm here. And there's a million reasons why I shouldn't be in this place, in this spot, but it's happening and I need to get a really good picture of it. So, yes. But in that same breath, because it was such tunnel vision, I knew because I guess this had crossed my mind before, but I also cover a lot of really stressful news events that when I do have tunnel vision, it's never just about one picture. It's about everything that's happening in every direction. And so for me, this is like he's literally going off stage. This is me standing right there in that same corner. And I'm for the first time, I'm like, oh, there's like people, other people responding. Like this is affecting more than just like Donald Trump. He's being whisked away, but like there's more things happening around me. And so I just told myself like I'm not capable to like actually understand everything that's going on around me, but I knew that I needed to take pictures of everything. Um, and so I just like stood in one place once he left. This is him leaving in that same exact moment. Again, this is all happening in like 90 seconds. This was the first good look of blood, like a close picture of like his ear and blood. And so like again, like I didn't, nobody there knew what happened for hours, really, for at least an hour. We all kind of thought like he must be dead because there was blood coming out of his head. Like, and that's the assumption everybody had for at least that first hour. And so as he got whisked away, I just told myself I needed to be like a clock. For some reason, that image came in my head, and I just went every like 15 and I turned and I shot like wide, medium, tight of like everything I was seeing. Like, because there were people shot on both sides of me. So, like, over on the left and then over on the right, and like people are freaking out and responding. And so, anyways, I just wanted to cover the entire story because I knew that these people were arguably just important as the pictures of the president. And what's
Excuse me,
crazy,
Jabin, we have a
yeah,
question from the audience from Stephen Hart.
sure.
He wants to know how far away you are from the photo where Trump was being carried. Stephen said 5 feet, question mark, but it's
Yeah,
probably like
I
four
mean,
pictures back, 5 pictures
yeah,
back.
maybe 5 feet. Yeah, I can go back. I mean, maybe 5 feet max. I pretty much shot everything at 24. This is a bit of a crop. But yeah, it's we're really close. We're really close, and the only reason we're close is because we happen to be in that buffer area, and then all chaos ensued. So, like, if anybody had themselves put together, there's no reason we would be there. There's no, I mean, this is such a like unique circumstance. Um, yeah, it's not. We were very close, but there to my right is somebody physically pushing me away from this picture, from this scene, because I went as far as they would let me to try and get at the bottom of that stage. Um, and yeah, so I wanted to show the crowd just as much, and so I took some time to really, as everybody else is filing, because I'm one of four photographers, and it's always kind of a race to make the news. Everybody's kind of filing live from their cameras, and I just told myself like this moment is more important to see it all. And so I showed the crowd. And what's crazy is like this picture of this group of people, again, this lasted seconds. And immediately in everybody's adrenaline, it turned to anger towards us, like it was somehow our fault. And it was quite scary. This is one of the last pictures before we were whisked away by the campaign staff. But this like sadness and scaredness all of a sudden turned to anger, somehow directed towards us, and we got out of there. And so in that same breath, I also like in my clock, the final turn was the stage, and I realized like, oh wow, his shoes are still there. That's crazy. And just shot a few pictures of his shoes as we were kind of being whisked away.
How
Um,
did you know that the crowd was turning against the press? Like, were they saying things? Was
oh
it something
yeah,
body language? Okay.
oh yeah. No, so that right after this, I mean seconds after, most of these people, if not all of them, started standing up, looking at us because we were in front of them and the president had just left. And was like, "This is your fault." Like how, just it got weird and like angry, and people were shouting and screaming. I wish I had video of it because I can't even remember a lot of what was said. But specifically, it was like, "This is your fault." Like, I don't know how you could possibly think this is my fault, but I just take pictures. I don't know. I didn't do any of this.
So you
And so
said the campaign staff whisked you away. Did you have the constitutional right to remain there if you chose to?
If you wanted to, but wasn't. We still were under the impression that we are in an active shooter situation.
Oh.
I did not want to be in that space anymore. I mean, I like the president was gone. I was like, great, I got what I needed. Like, let's figure out. are we okay? I don't like what's going on. Again, like no comprehension of anything about like health or well-being, but I mean, we were in a privileged place. And so then they were like, okay, let's go. Like, let's get you all to a safe. It was helpful.
Mm.
The campaign safe was like, let's get you out of here because clearly there's a lot going on here in this brief moment. And so we went behind the riser, behind the stage, and the plan was originally to kind of go around back to the press riser. But when we turned the corner, there was somebody dying with EMTs on top of them. And the other direction was also EMTs responding to the other person that was shot. And so they said, let's just go in this green room tent and we'll figure this out. And so they put us in the tent with some of those staff members, like to run the teleprompter and things like that. And we sat there for, I don't know, it felt like 2 hours. I think it was probably like 30 minutes. I don't know. My concept of time was really off by this point. And then when we finally got the all clear to come out, every single person, including every member of the press, was gone. So we walked back out to a total wasteland and multiple official agencies arguing over who was going to be in charge of the scene. And they asked us to grab our things and move out quickly. And so then we went out to the parking lot and I sat in a parking lot for about 6 hours, filed pictures while they decided if this was an active crime scene that needed to investigate every person at the event or if they were going to let everybody drive off into the sunset. Um, and so let me show you that video real quick. Again, from my Ray-Ban glasses, this is seconds after the first shot, if that's okay. And that
Wow,
was
that's
it.
extraordinary.
And here's a brief map of all the pictures I showed you. There's one picture from the back stand. That's that first picture. And all of those other pictures I made in about 90 seconds right there around the stage.
That video is intense. I think I saw like, and probably others in the crowd maybe recognized. I think I saw Evan Vucci, Doug Mills, and Anna Moneymaker. There is a question in the chat saying, because you keep saying we, like they brought us to this space, and then who is the we? Is it the kind of few journalists who are right up next to the stage?
Yeah, so at that point in the campaign, there's not an official like traveling pool, but there are the organizations that cover regularly. Um, Washington Post, Getty, Reuters, AFP, New York Times, and this day there was four of us photographers let up. There were also a couple other journalists, and there's a documentary crew up there as well. But yeah, they remove us from the normal crowd in the back, and they usher us up again for like the first 5 minutes of the speech and the last 5 minutes of the speech, just so that we can get something more compelling of another speech.
Did
Um,
anybody ever request the use of your photos for evidence for an investigation or anything?
Not that I'm aware of, but I also don't own my pictures, so that's a Washington Post question. It would not surprise me. Nobody asked me directly.
so Jabin, one of the questions I had, and it goes back to the the first photo you have where Trump is pumping his fist, right? And you actually have two versions of an image like that at two different moments. And I remember in the immediate aftermath of this, the image whoever's image, right? Like yours or some of your colleagues, and the images where Trump kind of throws his fist up in the air. And I remember hearing talk of like, this is how triumphant he is. This is how strong he is. I'm curious to hear the photojournalist's reaction to people who say, that image serves an agenda, or that image paints the president in one light versus another light. And obviously, when we look at the breadth of your images and see the back-to-back fist pump and then the fragility, you get a like this complete picture. But what do you make of people who com some who loved and some who complained about the use of the fist pump images? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, of course. Um, I mean, I'll say that covering Donald Trump specifically for 11 years, like everybody's always going to bring their opinions to my pictures. It actually makes it really weird kind of showing my pictures, especially in like professional settings sometimes, because everybody has their opinions of Donald Trump. And it affects how they view my pictures. My goal in covering just politics in general is I want I want somebody to look at my picture on one side of the aisle and be like, that's the best picture of him I've ever seen. And I want somebody on the other side of the aisle to look at that exact same picture and be like, that was the worst picture I've ever seen of him. Like you got him. Like it's not my job to like put somebody like to follow somebody's agenda. I'm just showing what I see in hopefully the most interesting way, because people at a podium 99.99% of the time is really boring. I'm just trying to make interesting storytelling pictures. As for that picture, like I think the fact that it happened kind of makes it an inevitable conclusion. Um, these pictures were taken in the craziest of circumstances and then used for everything. Every political movement has used these pictures in some form or fashion. Um, for me, like my access kind of started dropping off afterwards because I didn't really publish, like I didn't share a bunch of pictures from this. I took a lot of time to sort of like sort out my feelings on it all. And I didn't do interviews or like I wasn't on TV talking about these things. It was a lot for me to process and figure out my thoughts on. And like what was happening with the pictures, like that's really overwhelming to me. I don't want any candidate anywhere on any side to ever be using my pictures for gain, or to be using it as against somebody else. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible all the time because that's the only way to cover politics. If you're not, then I mean, it's more like advocacy.
There's a question here. Do you still shoot? Do you still shoot for the Washington Post? If so, has that changed the way your work is used? So you can probably kind of get, I think in the bio I did mention, in case Simone, who posed the question, missed it, that you're a former Washington Post photographer. But maybe if you want to just talk about, I mean, I guess one of the questions that I was thinking of, which is maybe related to this question, is sort of having experienced this, right? Whether you're staff with the Washington Post or not, what were some of the lessons learned? And I mean that actually on like two levels. Like one, maybe from a safety perspective, lessons learned, and two, maybe from a what's going on with American society and our democracy, which is not specific to the photo, but given that you were right there and creating the visual history of this event, I feel like your take on this matters enormously.
Yeah, so no, I do not work for the Washington Post anymore. This week marks 11 years that I would have been there. I was laid off with the over 300 other people in the newsroom last month. And so I'm currently fun employed while I sort out what I want the rest of my life to look like and what I want to be when I grow up. Um, so no, I'm not shooting for the Washington Post. I um, think it's tragedy that an entire photo department was cut, and the importance that we bring to news coverage is essential, and they will have a lot to sort out with our absence. Um, Lauren, what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
The other part was the lessons learned, like a safety lessons, and also kind of what's going on in the United States today. That
Yeah.
second part is too big, but like what maybe insights, because you did say I took time to reflect, and part of the reflection was just like what you just experienced personally. But if you also reflected on a kind of more societal level, like what does this mean?
Yeah, I think in the moment it was very much um, just sorting out how to process being 6 feet away from a presidential candidate that got shot at. Um, and like that, that's never happened to me before. And like there was all kinds of like, well, just for background, the next day at 6 a.m., I flew from Pennsylvania to the RNC and did a week and a half, well, a week there. And then I came home for 2 days and went to the Olympics in Paris for a month and change. So like I kind of kept myself busy while I sorted out my feelings on everything. There was most of the big chunk was my feelings on like maybe almost dying and like being in danger and like I'm married, I now have a child, like things that I had never really had to think about my safety in that sort of way. I mean, I've covered lots of protests and riots and hurricanes. Like I love breaking news. That's my favorite thing. But I'd never, I would say, been in like this close of a like threatening situation. And so a lot of it was that. But then just realizing like, whoa, like we were on a front row seat to one of the most pivotal times in our politics. And still, I mean, I think every day I'm learning more about what it all meant because it's kind of it's changing regularly. My thoughts and feelings on it. I think I'm just glad we were all okay. I spent a lot of time. I'd never done like hostile environment training or any of those things. I knew nothing about how to like protect myself if I was ever injured or help anybody. And so I took some time I maybe got a little obsessed in my response of understanding how to keep myself safe and like just learning about uh, medical issues and how to help people. I did a bunch of like HEFAT training. The Washington Post was more than excited to send me to every possible training following that event. And so now I feel, I would say prepared, but I feel like I would have some sort of like plan if something awful did happen again around me while working. That being said, I'm now unemployed, and the safety net that is a massive organization behind you, security teams and equipment and training and all that, it's a little unsettling to think about covering some of these more spicy topics without the backing of anybody. Like, I don't know who I would call if I got arrested or beat up or whatever. So that's a whole new world that I need to think about some more.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And there's some love for you in the chat. Brenda Dawson Dove says your pictures are amazing, making what could be boring images so interesting and creative. I can't believe the post would let you go. Brenda, we all second and third your we can't believe the post would do this. And Jabin, also just thank you for sharing these concerns around a kind of evolving journalism landscape and safety. And as somebody who comes from the kind of safety advocacy space, it's distressing and alarming that the risks that journalists are facing have really grown exponentially in the recent past. Because as you said, Jabin, right, like this work is vital. Like journalism is vital to democracy, and the fact that journalists are facing way more than they should. It's something that, I'm always wanting to talk about. And I think, Dee, you are going to be talking about issues of other kinds of volatility. And so I'm going to pivot over to Dee with the same request that people kind of drop their questions in. I think we'll have time at the end also if there's some more questions from the audience. If Dee says something and then you realize, oh, this is really a question for both Jabin and Dee. But Dee, I read your bio before. And so I'm not going to reread it now, but I want to turn it over to you and, learn from you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm not much of a public speaker, so bear with me. I'm just gonna jump right into it. Um, so this particular video that I'm about to show is very early on in immigration court in Manhattan, and I'll let the video speak for itself.
Wait, Dee, your share screen isn't going yet.
Is it on now?
No, the share the green share button at the bottom.
There we are.
Yeah, perfect.
Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Back. 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 Back up. Hey, please, back up. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. You gotta get back. Just give us space. You gotta get back. You can get hit. Just get back. All right, we're gonna three. Get up here, flip here, now. Get up here. Guys, move. Everybody get out of the way. Move. Stay back. Just stay back. Obviously, I'm moving, bro. So that was just to start setting the tone as what actually happens in immigration court. Pretty much, we've all seen and heard what's been going on in immigration court, and very early on, it was pretty much the Wild West. We were looked at as the enemy, as you can tell. That one agent I was clearly backing up. He chose to single me out of the crowd, push me, and approach me and so forth. Um, and once again, as Jabin had used the meta glasses, that video was from meta glasses. So once again, a win for the metas. This photo here is an agent that was pretty much hiding in a storage locker area because he was waiting for a person to step out so he can detain. This is your daily scene. Families are on the scene and so forth, and they will be standing by waiting for the person that they're waiting to detain. This person, he stepped out to go to the restroom, and he hadn't even seen the judge, and he was detained. This one person on the right with the mask on, she was an activist and an observer, and she was detained once she interfered with a detainment of the gentleman in the back. Once again, he wasn't even aware that he was about to be detained. He walked out of the courtroom, and ICE agents, federal detainment agents, just snatched him up, started grabbing him. He resisted because he was reacting to not even being spoken to and having hands put on him, and that quickly escalated. This woman is being detained. This is an ICE agent escorting her to a stairwell. Another person being detained. This particular triptych is the exact same hallway, three different scenarios. Uh, Family coming in, agents standing outside waiting, and for people to walk out from that particular courtroom, and children sitting outside as their family are inside attending to their business. This particular scene here is one of the hardest scenes for me. To this day, it's one of the ones that this is one particular scene that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Um, they were waiting for this particular gentleman to come out. He was with his family. Um, as he's walking out, he was approached by Border Patrol, ICE agents, and he was told he was going to be arrested. His daughter, which is in the pink, hugging him, grabbed him by the waist and started shouting, "Don't take my daddy. That's my only daddy." So, me being a father myself and having a daughter, that pretty much hit home. And to this day, it's still one of the most difficult experiences I've had as a photojournalist. Just seeing, her heart being broken as her father was about to be detained. This is her little sister, same incident. She's looking up at ICE agents as they're taking her father. The mother's trying to step in. She's doesn't know that her father's probably holding her hand for the last time in probably for months or years. This particular woman was escorting a friend, and that friend was detained, and she got into a verbal altercation with ICE agents, and she was not having it. They responded inappropriately, and she wanted to handle that particular incident physically. Luckily, it didn't get to that point. Um, this is a colleague. He was actually pushed while there was a detainment happening. He fell, banged his head. He ended up being transported via ambulance to the hospital. Everything ended up being fine, but it shows how pretty much dangerous it is to still be working in this particular scenario, where you know you you're inside a building, you've been screened, you don't have any weapons, but that doesn't mean violence still be will still not touch you. This is Controller Brad Lander. He was there regularly. He was arrested once in the courthouse for interfering with a detainment. He was actually helping a family. He was consoling a family who had actually not lost, but had a family member that was detained. This woman here, she just came out of court. She was granted an extended leave, and once again, that was ignored, and she was detained and taken into ICE custody.
Excuse me, were these all taken in one day or were they taken over a period of time?
I was in I was inside federal court for 7.5 months. I was embedded within the federal courtrooms and federal courthouse for 7.5 months documenting this. So this is all spread out within 7.5 months.
Hmm.
This particular scene is on the 10th floor of the courthouse. This is a floor where no one is allowed to enter because that's where people are detained. Politicians stepped in and went to the 10th floor, did a sit-in, and this is when Homeland Security came and detained multiple um, senators, councilmen, and Brad Lander. That's him on the right-hand side. And yes, Homeland Security came in and made multiple arrests on that particular day. Is one ICE agent greeting another agent. Her mask reads 100% human. This is the elevator that they usually use to navigate the building. I caught them as they were walking into as they were standing inside the elevator, I documented them, transporting themselves. These are people that have been detained, being transported on the 10th floor. I got off on the 10th floor, made a photo. I was waiting for the elevator. Nothing was happening I was waiting for the elevator. Doors open, and they were transporting people that they had detained on that particular day. This particular agent, he was one of the ones that I would conversate occasionally with, and he was really against all of this. And as you can tell, he's leaning against the wall, with his head against the wall. He hardly ever wanted to be there. This particular scene ended up developing. They went to detain the father, which is in the center of the frame. That's his child in the bottom. That's his wife to the right. It became a melee as they're trying to detain him. The stroller was about to flip over. I'm holding the stroller while trying to take photos, making sure the baby did not fall. And in the end, he ended up being detained. He was seeking refuge from Morocco, and yeah, ICE agents standing outside of the courtroom waiting for what they call targets to step out. That sheet that he has in his hand is usually a mugshot with the person's name and so forth. And I'm sorry, not a mugshot, a photo. Let me correct that. Of the person that they're looking to detain, and they just stand and wait. They know if the person is in the courtroom or they're expecting them to arrive. This incident is a little girl. She was crying. Her father was almost detained. It was mistaken identity, but the incident became a little bit volatile. Finally, they were able to ID him using the AI recognition, and they realized that he was not the person that they were looking forward to detain, but the trauma that was impacted on that child is still up and stands because she experienced 7 agents surrounding her father and ready to take him away. This particular ICE agent was not happy that this activist journalist was taking video and documenting what was going on, and he decided to confront her by recording her also while taunting her.
And Dee, I'm going to jump in because there's one or two questions coming in as you're speaking.
Sure.
One is kind of a big picture question, which is, having covered this quite intensely for, I think you said nearly 8 months, how has that impacted you as a photographer and a person? So that's kind of a big picture question. And then the more localized question is, did anyone ever warn the people who kind of go into the courtroom? Does anyone ever warn them on the way out that ICE might be waiting for them?
So for the first question, as far as how has it impacted me, to be very blunt, I have I've had nightmares. I have issues where I'm very, very sensitive towards children and the elderly. So, I have caught myself crying during a movie, and then I'm like, why am I crying? And it's related to because I've seen something that triggered a memory from what I had seen in the courtroom. And, I've been shooting for Reuters. They have offered me therapy. I just haven't taken that option up, but it's something that I'm pretty much considering. And what was the second question?
And then the second one was, And first, just thank you. I really appreciate it when journalists are open in speaking about emotional tolls, because I think it's a conversation that has not been had in this industry as long as the conversation around physical safety. So just a thank you to you for being open with to us to help all of us understand better that there's in kind of invisible injuries that happen with this kind of work. The second question was anyone ever able to warn the people walking out of the courtroom that ICE might be waiting right there to detain them?
So there's usually volunteers and activists or certain agencies that are outside on the ground. There's court observers that try to help people. They try to help and translate and so forth. And the agents, for the most part, early on they would try to hide somewhat. Now they that was pretty short lived. They pretty much just stand in the hallway. So if a person walks in, they do see them. They are aware of what's happening.
Thank you.
Um, this particular person, he was walking out of court. He was clueless as to what was going on, and he was briskly detained and marched off to his detainment. This particular agent peeking into the courtroom to see if the person she's looking for is sitting in the courtroom, and I am gonna close with this particular video. Bear with me. No, no me cojan así. Me cojan así, por favor. Venga. No, ven. Venga, ¿yo qué? ¿Qué pasó? Venga, no me cojan así. Ya, ya, no me cojan así, por favor. No me cojan así. ¿Por qué me cogen así, por favor? Pues no he hecho nada. Pero no me cojan así. Venga, no me cojan así. Ya, ya va a caminar. No me cojan así. Ya. Relájate. Sí, espérate. No, pues no me cojan así, yo. Por favor, camine. Yo pongo de mi parte. So that particular person was taken, and that was the scene as when he was being detained.
Sorry, I was muted. I was just saying thank you. I think you should stop the screen share because I'm seeing the Zoom itself echoed back. Thank you, Dee. That was really hard at times. Um, I think one of the things that occurs to me is that the second video, it's just really, really hard to see somebody so distressed and pleading. And the first video, what I think is really helpful about it is in contrast to the way photos work, right, as the single image that brings us close to a person or an event, that first video really lets us feel just how small this space is, where
Mhm.
everyone is crowded. And I think it's worth mentioning that 26 Federal Plaza, right, which is a downtown Manhattan, it's the only courtroom in the United States where journalists have access to these kinds of
Yes.
detainments. And so the documentation that Dee, you and your colleagues are creating, it is the only court adjacent documentation that is being created in the country. So it's like really, really important on this on this level. I think, I hope that people in the audience will be dropping some questions in. I'm wondering how you think about, because I know that even in my classrooms, this is a question I get from students a lot. Like you, Dee, and like
Mhm.
us, the viewing public, people are really, really moved and upset by images where children are crying, right? Like they're suffering too. And a lot of times my students will say, well, how do you get consent from a child? And of course, I'm like, well, children can't even give consent, right? But how do you think through these questions that sometimes the public says, like, oh, that's a vulnerable moment. Why are you taking a picture of it? How do you think through that? Or how do you answer the person who says, I don't know, like, did you talk to them about it? Like, how do they feel about it? Like, what would you say to my students?
So the first thing I would say, the reason that we do document these moments and they are uncomfortable is the reason why we document them. If it was peaches and roses, we wouldn't need to document that. We need to show the ugliness of the world so we can invoke dialogue, invoke change. So if I'm showing you a beautiful photo, that's not gonna change much, is it? So that's pretty much where I stand on that. I do have something that I normally drop. I'm gonna drop it in the chats. I am not much of a speaker, but I tend to write my thoughts out a little bit more. And I just included that in the chat so people can feel free to read that and go through it if they would like.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, and in some regards, what you've written here echoes some of what Jabin was saying, where this part of my work isn't to direct you towards a specific conclusion or action, but that I'm here to bear witness, right? And then kind of you do with it what you will. But I also really like this notion that you were just describing, which is my work is meant, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, my work is meant to make you feel uncomfortable, right? There are
Yeah.
uncomfortable things happening in our society, and I want you to feel the discomfort.
Yes, exactly.
There was another question here saying, why is it the only court that we have access to? And Dee, I can field that, or you can field that if you want to.
Um, I'll let you fill it in.
So, in my understanding, and I apologize, I'm just trying to remember who Brenda posted the question. I think it's a great question. So, like courtrooms these are federal courts. It is a government space, and you don't automatically have the access to it. There are some phenomenal lawyers in the United States who work to represent the rights of journalists. And one of those lawyers, who's been, for lack of another word, who's been pretty badass for photojournalists, essentially negotiated and argued for access for journalists to 26 Federal Plaza because it is one of the main courts where people are moving through. And so it's been a phenomenal thing that this lawyer did for journalism. Okay, so I see some more questions coming in. How do you manage the inherent danger you face while photographing?
Um, uh, I've taken HEFAT training and so forth, and you know, it sound a little cliche, but our job is to run towards danger while everybody's running against it, away from it. So, and let's be honest, I'm pretty sure Jabin can attest to this. We're all a little bit of a adrenaline junkies. So, uh, there's nothing else that I would be doing, that I enjoy. So this is definitely factors into that.
Do you have to show credentials in order to get into the Javits building?
Yes. Um, our credentials need to be on display at all the time. Like I have mentioned, there are legal observers that are there and so forth, but they're not allowed to stand in the hallways. They're usually restricted to waiting rooms and so forth.
And have there ever been journalists that were arrested at the Javits?
No, I've never personally witnessed anybody. I've witnessed threats to be arrested. I've witnessed um journalists being shoved. I've witnessed, journalists being taken away in an ambulance. but I've never witnessed, cuffs on someone.
Lauren, why don't we move on to show
Mhm.
Madison's work, and then we can come back to questions if there's time at the end.
That sounds great. Dee, thank you for sharing all of that. And I am going to do a quick share screen um, with Madison's work again. She's sick. But I'm going to just read this statement from her and then I'll share her images. So Madison Swart, who, like Dee, and you'll see some of these images, has been covering the court in Manhattan, including a number of other spaces. She says, I want to apologize for not being able to participate on this panel. I was really looking forward to this discussion, to your questions, and to speaking about my work and experiences, but I currently have pretty bad bronchitis and would not be able to do this important topic justice today. A little bit about me. I'm a freelance photojournalist based in New York City. I've been on assignment for the New York Times, CNN, Reuters, Politico, Le Monde, Mother Jones, and others. While I've been documenting for about 6 years now, I first started regularly showing up to photograph protests and community response after the murder of George Floyd. Over the past year, I've traveled across the country covering immigration enforcement, protests, and moments of political unrest. I was in Minneapolis documenting Gregory Bovino's convoy, the community response, and ICE enforcement, and I also spent 5 months documenting immigration court at 26 Federal Plaza. I was also there this past Saturday, so we're all news consumers, we're all reading the headlines. I was also there this past Saturday covering Jake Lang's anti-Muslim rally when the homemade bomb threats occurred. A lot of the time when we go out to cover actions, you can anticipate what you might encounter and you prepare accordingly. Sometimes that means expecting conflict or situations where chemical munitions might be used. While I was anticipating tension on Saturday, a bomb threat was nowhere near on my radar. It really opened my perspective to how unprepared many of us were in that moment if something had actually gone off. It has raised a lot of questions for me about safety, risk, and how we navigate covering these kinds of flashpoints, questions I was really looking forward to candidly discussing with all of you. Please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram if you have any questions about my work. So I'm going to show you images by Madison. I'm going to let the images largely speak for themselves because she organized her presentation in chapters. This, of course, is Bovino. Move downtown Manhattan. Dee, is that the same man from your video?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And of course, I'll point out the irony that press has to keep their credentials exposed at all times while ICE keeps their face masked at all times. Protests. This is the No Kings, or this is the LA ICE protests. And I will mention that Madison herself was shot with crowd control munitions while she was working in Los Angeles. And this brings us to just this past weekend. Jake Lang, who's a far-right voice. This is a homemade incendiary device. And I believe the police said later on that one of the devices was filled with screws and nail things that would eventually, essentially cause massive shrapnel damage, which could certainly result in death had it gone off. And that's the end of Madison's presentation.
Lauren, do we know if the two people shown in the last two photos were the people who threw the incendiary devices were they the people who were being arrested?
I'm not sure about the person who's being tackled on the ground, but the young man in the, I think it's like the last photo, yes, he is one of the two who was arrested. And they're really, really young, I think 18 and 19 years old. We have a few minutes left, and I have not been looking at the chat because I was running the slideshow. So if there are some questions in the chat, Glenn, if you want to help me field if there's anything that we missed. I think maybe one final question that I would like to ask of the two photojournalists here today. Um, it's a question that I, as a professor, think about and discuss with my students, and a question that I, as a news consumer, think about. In a moment when pretty much everyone is carrying a device that allows them to take pictures, right? And I think there is, of course, value to citizen journalism. But what do you see as the unique responsibility or advantage of the trained photojournalist, right? So to the person who says, "Yeah, but I can make pictures too," what would you say in response? Dee, I can start with you.
For me, I would say the most important thing is ethics. We don't, we are human, so we do have our own personal views and our own personal take on life. But I know for me personally, once I pick up that camera and I have that press badge over around my neck, I'm as objective as I can possibly be. And there is not, I'm there to document the truth. I'm there to document history, and that's pretty much it for me.
I'll second that. I would say another part is just a lot of what I cover involves a lot of nuance and the ability to show more than what people normally see is essential in understanding politics and where our country is and where it's going. A lot of what I do is people standing on stage, but a lot of the storytelling pictures are not people standing on stage. And so, how do you tell these stories in compelling ways that make people care about something that's so easy to gloss over, especially when you see it and read it every single day for years? Um, so just that ability to show a deeper level of storytelling and make people care about things they probably wouldn't care if they didn't, weren't compelled by a good image.
Granted, not being the professional photojournalist, but running the photojournalism program and working with photojournalists all the time, I want to third both of your comments. And actually, I even want to say you do even more that sets, in my opinion, that sets you apart from the person with their cell phone. And like part of what we've seen across the body of works today is the ethics, Dee, that you talked about, the compassion for some of these really difficult topics, the ability to recognize power, but also moments of fragility when it's on display through those in power. I think the ability to pivot under really quickly changing circumstances. And I mean that even just at the level of technique, right? Like, which lens do I need? But I also mean pivot in terms of modulating, like where you are and how you are reacting to the moment, and you're doing it really quickly. And the other thing that I think journalists do extremely well, in part because it's their job, but that sets them apart, in my opinion, is understanding which moments, even if they might seem small to the next person, which moments are actually newsworthy because you think and see in terms of a wider historical contextual breadth, and you put things together. I mean, Jabin, that to me is how the word kind of storytelling matters, right? It's like kind of seeing the big picture and understanding how do I show it to you and make you interested in it.
I think for me too, like covering the same thing for such a long time, like it's really easy to get wrapped up, like covering the White House and things like that. It's easy to get like really fixated on the news of the day. But when you're somebody who covers the same thing every day for years, you get the opportunity to see it as this broader story, kind of just like a never-ending documentary of that context and the pictures that you're making. You don't get lost in the daily news, though those pictures are important, but you're also seeing it with the context of a decade of covering it, and you're able to make pictures that help speak to how we all might view this, 10, 20, 100 years from now.
Thank you. Glenn, did you want to give any final thoughts?
Well, I think there's one more interesting question in the chat that I'd just like to ask, and then I'll have just a final comment. But from Karen O'Hearn, she says in the past days she's read about journalist to journalist aggression in a New York City courtroom by someone physically moving another photographer away from getting the photo. Can you comment if you've experienced that? And second, the ethics about publishing images from agreed upon quarantine area. So I guess both of these are for you, Dee, photographing from the courtroom.
Um, I'm choosing to not comment on this. It's a little topic that's going around right now, and I'm choosing to keep myself out of it.
Okay.
And I'll just I think it's a super complex topic, and with like 5 minutes, it's going to be really hard to deal with it. But I think the question, or we can just go back to Dee's point that ethics matters. I like ethics in the industry, and ethics in every image is vital.
So the closing comment that I would like to make is a moment ago, both of you spoke about your being professional journalists and you abide by photojournalism ethics and about objectivity. But I think that's a very complicated concept within the media because I mean clearly CNN is mainstream. Well, not it is major media and it has one perspective, and Fox News is also major media and it has another perspective that it brings to the conversation. So I always feel that there's a lot of room for journalist subjectivity in these matters. So it's not so much of a closing comment and maybe a closing question to both of you about the space for your own subjectivity as professional journalists. Jabin, you're smiling there.
I would say my subjectivity comes from what I choose to cover and what I spend my time covering. I do my best to do stories that I think are important for people to see. I don't, subjectivity would limit what I could do in this field. And the great thing about pictures is it's going to be the most earnest and honest view of what's happening. Um, my pictures have been used. I mean, the Post distributes to Getty, so my pictures have been used for every form of news, editorial, book, poem, art installation, for all purposes. And I think that's just wonderful. Like I think it should be used for everything. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show it as honest as possible. The camera is a beautiful thing that makes it as honest as it could be, I would say. And so, I'm going to stick to that and I'm going to keep trying to cover things that I think are really important and bring attention to things that I think people should pay attention to.
Okay.
Far as for me, I may sound a little bit elitist, but I don't consider broadcast news to be real news. if you want to know something, actually pick up a newspaper, read it.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I guess that's pretty much my stance on that one. You know, talking heads on TV, they're not journalists. There's somebody that was casted,
Okay, I
and I'll leave
appreciate
my
that
hands up on
response.
that.
Well, maybe another panel we could have in SDN is the concept of activist journalism, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I really want to thank everybody for being here tonight, the two presenters and Lauren, and for the audience, and for Madison, even though she couldn't be here tonight. So really want to give you all a big hand and hope everybody could come out to our other upcoming programs. We will post this to our YouTube channel in the next few days, and I'll send out an email to everybody who registered to let them know that it's available.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Jabin. Thank you, audience.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jillian.
all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.